All right, great. Thank you for joining us today. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. I will give you a way to communicate with me at the end to get a copy of these slides and the recording. So this will be available to you after today's presentation. If you do have any questions as we go along, please feel free to type them in the chat box. I'll stop periodically as I'm going through the slides and ask if there's any questions or read any questions that are in the chat box. So thanks again for joining. And today we're going to be learning a little bit about if franchise ownership is right for you. Some of the things that we'll cover in today's webinar are, before I get started with that, I'll introduce myself and tell you a little bit about my background. Like a lot of my clients, I came out of corporate America, so I was in mortgage banking for 20 years. And when the markets imploded, if you remember the Great Recession, that's when I lost my income. I literally lost my income overnight. I was 100% commission, and I really didn't know what I was going to do. So I started researching businesses because I really kind of wanted to get off that hamster wheel. My son was 8 at the time. My mom was living with us, helping us raise our son. And I worked a lot of hours. I really wanted more flexibility in my life and a little bit more control. You know, the mortgage banking market is typically, it's great and booming, and then there's layoffs, and then it's great and booming, and then there's layoffs. Like, right now, if you're following mortgages and the rates being up, it's tough for those that are working in that industry that are 100% commission. So I've been franchise consulting since the end of 2007, and it's been 17 years. I actually did this independently for the first 6 years, and then I joined FriendNet in 2013. And FriendNet is a franchise. So I've seen the difference between being independent and being part of a franchise, and I understand the support that's involved with the franchise. And I would say I'm definitely drinking the punch. My husband and I actually opened a franchise as well in 2016. We did that together. We ran that for a couple of years in the busiest mall in San Diego, Fashion Valley Mall. And I'm also a co-author on a book for veterans called From Boots to Business. And my colleague and I, who I'm going to introduce here in a minute, are co-founders. We're both co-founders of a podcast called Unpredicted Entrepreneur. And really, we created that podcast to provide education and information to folks that are curious about business ownership and especially franchising. So we bring a lot of people in to tell their stories or to educate. And that podcast is available on any of the podcasting platforms as well as on our YouTube channel. Sarah is my partner in the Dallas-Fort Worth market. Because the Metroplex is so large, she handles the Fort Worth side and I handle the Dallas side. We also cover Oklahoma, and she's actually the market president and owner. She's been in franchising for 9 years, and she was also part of the franchise advisory committee for 4 years. Most franchise companies will have franchise advisory committees, and really that's a committee of people that have been selected by their peers, other franchisees, to represent them. They're kind of a liaison between the franchisees and the franchisor. And it's really about, being the voice of the franchisees and moving things forward. So she was selected for that. She and her husband together own 2 brands and 7 locations. Her husband owns 4 gyms, and she's got 3 locations with FriendNet. She's been in the area since 1987. Actually, 1987 is when FriendNet was founded as well. So a little bit of a coincidence there. And then, as I mentioned earlier, she's also the co-founder of Unpredicted Entrepreneur. And her background was marketing and sales. And she had the opportunity to work with small businesses and saw some of their struggles. So when she learned a little bit about franchising, she felt like franchising was a great hybrid between corporate America and working for someone else and being completely independent. Prior to being in sales and marketing with those and working with those small businesses, She had been in corporate America with AT&T for many years and decided to take a break and raise her children. And then when she came back from that, she was involved with the small businesses and then started her franchise, FriendNet. All right, so our agenda today, we're gonna get into why would you want to own a business in the first place? Why business ownership versus working for a company, or maybe there's a way to do both at the same time and then eventually exit corporate America at a future date. We'll look at your options for going into business. There's three main options, three ways of doing that. And then we're also going to look at the risks and the rewards. What are the pros and cons of being in business? We'll do a little bit of myth busting about franchising, which is my favorite part of this workshop. And then we'll talk about how do you find the best option for you and building a business model. Building a business model is part of the process in determining what the best fit is for you. Who is FriendNet? We are a franchise that helps people find franchises. And I'm going to mute myself for a second. I'm getting over a cough. Okay, sorry about that. So we have, for many years, been matching potential entrepreneurs to the right franchise opportunity. There are more than 100 of us all over the United States and in Canada. And then we have national partnerships with organizations like SCORE and the Small Business Development Center. These are local organizations that provide a lot of assistance to potential business owners as well as those in business that want to grow their business. Most of their workshops and consulting and coaching is at no charge or at a very low cost. And that's because these organizations are part of the SBA, the Small Business Administration, and your tax dollars actually pay for these services. So I always encourage folks to do a local search and find an office close to you and look at their classes that they're offering. And there's a lot of good information there that you can use to educate yourself as you're thinking about starting a business. All right, so what do? We match prospects with franchisors. So education is first, educating you about franchising, the opportunities that are out there, the way to do proper due diligence, and really facilitating the process of helping you find the right fit for you. We always give you multiple choices. We want you to compare and contrast. I always let my prospects know that they're going to learn a lot about themselves in this process, and I'll learn from them. And together we'll figure this out, what the best fit is for them. And FriendNet, since we're a franchise, we pre-screen the franchisors that are in our inventory. So of all the franchises that are out there, we don't work with all of them. A lot of them don't work with consultants. A lot of the big brand names that you might recognize don't work with consultants. And then I always say, every industry, this applied to mortgage banking when I was in mortgage banking, and you could, I'm sure, apply this to any industry. There's the good, the bad, and the ugly. So really, we want to focus on the good. We pre-screen. We want to make sure that the franchisors that are in our portfolio that we're offering to our prospects are good opportunities for them. And we are not in the role of selling franchises. We're just in the role of facilitating and making the match and coaching you through the process. Our services are at no cost because the franchisors actually pay us to help them find the right fit for their concept. So we work just like an executive recruiter. We're paid on the back end by the franchisor if we make a successful placement, which in no way impacts the fees that you pay to the franchisor. There is financing available. A lot of our clients will do multiple forms of financing to put their franchise package together. So our partners, we've got 3 lending partners that have been approved by FriendNet that we use across the nation and up in Canada. And these folks, what they'll do is they'll look at your financial picture, they'll give you all of your options and let you know the cost of those options. And then as you're going through this process, you can also be thinking about what lending options might be the right fit for you. So the rates have gone up, the lending environment is changing. A lot of times it's kind of nice to get a pre-qualification up front. Our lending partners will do that. They don't charge for doing a pre-qualification. And they also teach you how to do a soft pull on your credit so that it does not impact your credit score. So educating yourself along the way while you're looking at franchises about your financing options is the best way to go through this process. We are the only franchise consulting organization that provides a client bill of rights to our clients. And what this does is it gives you a list of the things that we are going to do for you. We tell you up front what our role is in this process and what you can expect from us and what you can expect in this journey so that there's no surprises and no questions. So getting into owning a business. Imagine that you own a business and that you're successful in business. How your life would be better. What would change for you? And how would this be different from working for someone else? There's no right or wrong answer to this question. And everybody's got a different answer. For me, I would say flexibility was number one with a young child at home in all the hours I was working. And no more layoffs. When the industry is good, it's good, and then you get laid off. Regardless of how good you are at what you do or how loyal you've been, you end up laid off and finding yourself in transition. So some folks aren't feeling successful. Some want more independence, but really it's important for you to understand your why. Your why it has to be big enough to get you through maybe the discomfort of taking a risk and starting a business. And the unfortunate part is most people, even though they really do feel that they want to start a business, will go to work for someone else. And the reasons are that sometimes they don't know who to turn to for help or how to get started in this process. They might feel like they need specific skills to run a franchise. That would apply more, I would say, in an independent business, and we'll talk a little bit more on a later slide about why you may not need those specific skills for a franchise. Money's a big part of it. Some people will get online and start looking at franchises, and they'll immediately go to things that they're familiar with and realize how expensive it is. So they might think that they can't afford it. I would say the number one risk is fear, or I'm sorry, the number one reason is fear. It's the risk, right? Of will I succeed or will I fail? And when you're looking at that, a job might feel like it's safer because it's an immediate income, it's got benefits, and then, waiting until the economy is better. I feel like there's always something going on that could encourage us to want to wait until it gets better. But my belief is that if you wait for the perfect storm, it may never happen. Now, working for someone else is certainly safer in the short term, but like my example with my mortgage banking industry, can you be sure that your job is safe? What happens if your company gets acquired or private equity comes in? What happens if they start outsourcing or they need to downsize for some reason? So regardless of how well you're performing and how loyal you are, will that guarantee you your job? And will what you're doing now help you meet your long-term financial goals and meet your retirement goals? And if not, what are some of the options you can do to change that? I will say that owning your own business can be scary at first. I started my business in the worst economy we've ever seen. And it was tough for the first few years. There were a lot of tears. I ran a lot, I cried a lot, and I prayed a lot. It was tough getting through that. But I will tell you, it's the best decision that I ever made. And if you build your business right, you will become more and more ingrained in the community that you're in, the more people you know and the more people that you've helped, the more referrals that will come your way. So the longer you own your business, the safer it should become. And you have the control to grow that business at the pace that you want. And you also have the control to potentially keep your job and also create an additional revenue stream and step away once there's some income coming in or once your income has been replaced. So there's a lot of ways that you can do this. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to completely step away and go without an income for a year or two to get your business up and running. Now, the economy is something that we always consider, right? We've been through the Great Recession. Now we've been through a pandemic. So how does that affect your business? I will say that there's different types of businesses. So there's what I call wants-based businesses and needs-based businesses. And a lot of the needs-based businesses will continue to thrive in all economic conditions. You know, if you look back at the pandemic, what were the essential services? Cleaning, cleaning businesses couldn't even keep up, especially the commercial cleaning businesses, and they were charging a fortune to go in and spray everything down and sanitize. People still need their cars to run. Businesses still need services. They need marketing help. They need coaching. Parents are always going to spend money on their children. So if you look at this list here, there's a lot of growing markets and markets that are historically have been shown to thrive regardless of what's happening in the economy. And then some other things to consider outside of that list that you just looked at is think about the money that people spend on their pets. Pet ownership exploded during the pandemic, and people spend a crazy amount of money on their pets. I'm guilty of that. I'm a pet mom. I'm a rescue mom, and a lot of times when you rescue, your pets are special needs and need some special attention. Homeowners still want to maintain their homes. The home services absolutely exploded during the pandemic. I know somebody that even built a climbing wall in their house for their young children to have something to do. So signage, that was another business that really did well during the pandemic. If you think about all those little dots on the floor that said stand here when you were lining up 6 feet apart, all the restaurants that did pickup that had those flags outside saying that they did pickup, or all of the what are those things called? The see-through plastic partitions that all the registers had, or the restaurant put those partitions up, between the booths. All that stuff is created by sign companies. So, and of course, you live in a place like Texas, mosquitoes aren't going anywhere, right? So those services continue to thrive, and parents continue to spend money on their children. So there are a lot of industries that would be safer, I would say, than others if you tend to be more risk averse. So I'm going to take a breath here and find out, are there any questions before we get into the next section? I don't see anything in the chat box. If you do have a question for me, please type it in there and I'll answer it. All right, so we'll get into business ownership options and the pros and cons of each. So the first category here is starting an independent business from scratch. Franchising isn't for everybody, and I'm the first to admit that. If you're super creative and you want to carve your own path and build your own brand and you're very entrepreneurial, franchising is probably not going to be your spot. It's going to be uncomfortable for you. So building your own business from scratch gives you complete control over everything. You get to make all your own decisions. You can create something from your own passion. You can be creative about it. The only rules you're following are the rules that you've created. And if it's successful, it's going to have the largest upside. Now, the disadvantages are that you have to do everything yourself. You have to create all the systems. I always say that, when you're going into business independently, you don't know what you don't know. So a lot of times you make mistakes that can be very costly, which is the reason that independent businesses do have the highest failure rate. They can also ramp up a lot more slowly because of the fact that you don't know what you don't know, and you learn those things that you don't know along the way, and then you have to figure out a way through those hurdles. It is a little bit harder to get financing as well for an independent business. The next opportunity is buying an existing business. So this is an existing independent business that somebody has created that's now on the market for sale. So, and you'll notice here that a lot of the advantages are also the disadvantages. The struggle with buying an existing business that's not a franchise is that there's no third party due diligence that you can do. These sales are always very confidential. So you can't talk to the employees, you cannot talk to the customers. So where do you go to get information outside of the seller, the person that's listing this business for sale? So sometimes it's hard to know what the true cash flow is. Everyone tries to save money on taxes, so they don't always report all of their income. And if they're not reporting it, then how do you know it's actually real income? So getting a really good CPA is crucial in this type of an opportunity. Most small businesses and franchises will sell for 2 to 3 times what they're netting. So if it looks like it's making a little more than it is, and you're paying a multiple of that, you could end up paying a little bit more for that business than you should, which could potentially give you higher debt service because you'd be getting a loan on a higher sales price. And then is that seller going to stay around to train you and support you? And what's the true reason that business is for sale? Are they being honest, or is it really because they want to retire? The other thing that could be an issue is there might be a lot of loyalty to that current owner. So will the employees want to stay, or will you even want those employees to stay? Sometimes those employees might not be on the same page as you as far as the culture that you're trying to create. I know a lot of businesses that exchange hands where they have to let the employees go and start over again. And the customers also might have loyalty and not all want to stay. And you purchase that business based on the amount of business that those customers were providing to that business. So I believe the safest way to buy a resale is to see if that seller is willing to provide some owner financing. If that seller provides owner financing to you, they are going to be a little bit more engaged and interested in your success because they want you to be successful enough to pay that loan off, right? You owe them money. So I feel like, in my personal and humble opinion, that might be the only way that I would buy an independent business that would be for sale. And our third option for going into business is franchising, right? And just like the others, there's pros and cons. Now, with franchising, at least there's a proven business model. I talked about when you're starting an independent business from scratch, you don't know what you don't know, and there's a lot of mistakes that are made that can be costly. Well, in this scenario with franchising, some independent business owner already did that. They made the mistakes and they figured it out, and now it's a well-oiled machine. They've got multiple locations. They've proven themselves over and over again. So really, you're just tapping into a proven system. You're going to have training and support. Franchises have much lower failure rates than independent businesses. And a lot of times, even though you think it might be more expensive, it's at a lower cost because upfront what that investment is going to be, and there's not really going to be any surprises unless something goes wrong in your personal life that ends up causing you to have more expenses. And financing is easier to get. Franchises are a lot less risky from a banking point of view. And the other nice thing about franchising is the amount of disclosure that's done. So you will get to learn a lot about this franchise, not just through the franchisor, but also the other franchisees. And the other franchisees are often the most overlooked part about the training and support that's available. So you've got a support system, not just from the franchisor, but from your fellow franchisees as well. Now, some of the disadvantages are there are fewer industry options, and you can't create something from your own expertise or your own passion or your own creativity. You are going to be following a proven system that's structured, and there are territory restrictions as well. The whole world is not your oyster. You will own a specific territory, and you'll only be able to market your business within that territory. If there are products available with this franchise, those are the products that you'll sell. You can't bring in your own, unless it's a younger brand that's more emerging. Sometimes there are exceptions to this rule. And with the franchise, there's fees, right? There's the upfront franchise fee, and there are also ongoing royalty payments. And really what a franchise is, it's you're exchanging a fee upfront and ongoing royalties to have access to someone else's name and trademarks and all of the systems that they've created. So you're going to be doing business as XYZ franchise for a fee, and for that, you get that whole recipe and their secret sauce under which to operate. All right, so I said there was a lot of third-party disclosure that's available to you. Franchises are heavily regulated by the Federal Trade Commission. So by law, a franchisor has to disclose you with what we call a franchise disclosure document. To make it easy, we call it the FDD. That document is going to give you a lot of information about that franchisor. How long have they been in business, and what was their experience prior to that? Have they had any litigation or bankruptcies? And then they are going to break down the cost for you line item by line item, so you know exactly what your investment will be, including your working capital. Not just how much does it cost to get this franchise, buy the franchise and get all of your equipment or your signage, your marketing materials, but also how much working capital that you'll need to be able to pay the bills of that business until that business gets to the point where it can actually pay for itself or break even. They've opened enough of these locations to know just about how much you need to get that business to where it's now profitable. The other thing that will be in this document is a copy of the franchise agreement or the franchise contract. It's important for you to read that up front. Franchise agreements are all written in favor of the franchisor, and they're not negotiable. So up front, you want to see what that looks like, and you want to be able to get your head wrapped around that. I've had to talk a lot of my clients that have never looked at a franchise agreement before off the ledge, because when you first look at it, you might be in shock. So it's nice to see that up front. And then as you're going through this process and mulling over that agreement and getting to learn about the franchise and talk to the franchisees and understand all these other franchisees that you're speaking to, sign that same agreement, and you'll get to learn, are they doing well? Are they struggling? What's going on in that franchise? So that franchise disclosure document also lists all of the franchisees in the system, plus all of the franchisees that have left the system in the last 3 years. And speaking to them is crucial, because you're going to learn a lot about that franchise. We always kind of joke and say the franchisor is going to tell you how it should be. The franchisees will tell you how it is. So you want to make sure you're doing thorough due diligence, and that's part of what we coach you on. Those franchisees are going to let you know the success or failure rate of that system. And this is the only model where you're able to do this kind of research. You can't do this with an independent business. So franchising is the only industry that gives you this kind of extensive exposure to information, allowing you to do the research. All right, I'm going to try to do a poll here. I usually just do this as a Q&A. Let me see if I can get the poll to work. Okay, of course, now I don't see it. I saw it in my practice session. Here we go. All right, so myth or fact? So our first question is, franchising is only fast food and retail. What do you think? Is that a myth or is that a fact? You can type your answers in. All right, I don't see anyone typing any answers in, so we'll just go through this as a Q&A. The answer is that it's a myth. Franchising goes way beyond fast food and retail. In fact, there's 4,000 franchise companies approximately in the US and more than 90 industries with almost 800,000 operating units across the US. So it's a big, big industry. Our next true or false or myth or fact is that franchises succeed because of the quality of the product. That is a myth also. It's really all about the business systems. You know, my analogy that I like to use here is McDonald's. You know, if it's all about the quality of the product, and McDonald's is hugely successful, right? Is it because they have the best hamburgers on the planet? You know, some people will joke and say it's the French fries or it's the shakes. But you know, is that the best quality meat? Is it the greatest food for you? No, but one thing's for sure, they're consistent. So anywhere you go in the country, you're going to have consistency. You know, if I'm traveling and I'm on the road and there's not a lot of choices, I'm going to go there and get a chicken sandwich because I know at least it's not going to make me sick. I can trust it. You know, they're consistent, but they're a marketing machine. They market to us, they market to our kids. It's all about the sales that they do and the systems that they have in place that makes them successful. And what most franchises do is they take very successful industries and they consolidate those industries. You know, like burger joints back in the day, there were a lot of mom and pops, but McDonald's was the first one to kind of come in and consolidate that market and streamline it. And then look at all the other fast food franchises that came after that. All right, our next one is there are low cost franchise opportunities. Is that a myth or is that a fact? It's a fact. Now, I said on an earlier slide that there were almost 4,000 franchise opportunities out there, right? So if you take the first three big pieces of this pie here, you've got almost 50% of 4,000 franchises are available at a $250,000 or less total initial investment. And when I talk about initial investment, this does include working capital. So everything you need to get your doors open, plus 3 to 6 months of working capital at 250,000 or less. And then on the other side, we've got 25% or 26% and then 28%. So between that 250 and $500,000 range, I would say as far as our inventory goes, I break franchising into two categories. You've got service-based franchises and you've got brick and mortar based franchises. If you think about retail, like frozen yogurt or a UPS store or hair cutting, you know, those are things that need a storefront. Those are going to fall into that yellow section for the most part. Most of what's in our inventory that's a brick and mortar type of franchise will fall into that $250,000 to $500,000 total initial investment range. Now, are there things above that? Sure, but there's a lot available brick and mortar in that yellow category. Now, the service-based businesses are gray, orange, and blue. I would say there's probably not a whole lot available in blue. But between the orange and the gray section, there's a lot of service-based businesses that are available in that investment range. And honestly, we get this question a lot, you know, how much money do we need to invest if we want to make XYZ in income? There's no magic bullet. There's no automatic correlation between amount of money invested and amount you're going to make. These models are very different. Location-based models are very different than service-based models. You know, in a location-based model, you're doing a lot of marketing and trying to drive people to your location. When you're service-based, it relies on you more to get out into the community and penetrate your territory. You're not relying on people coming to you and how far they'll drive to get to your location. So they're just very different business models. Some of the ways that people invest, not only, their personal savings, banks are always going to require a cash injection. So whatever your project amount is, a bank is usually going to want to see 20 to 30% cash injection from you. And then you could get some additional help, right? A partner, relatives, family that might want to help you invest. With the latest boom in property values, we have a lot of clients that are tapping into some of their home equity, and they're taking a home equity line of credit and letting it sit there so that they can use those funds to help them start their business. That is a less expensive route than the SBA. There's ways to do liens against securities. We talked about seller financing if it's a resale. There's also a way to take pre-tax 401k and IRA assets and roll those directly into a business with no penalties and no taxes. There's actually IRS code written on that. It's part of the ERISA Act. It's been around for many years. And the 3 lending partners that I mentioned on a previous slide are the ones that can educate you further on that program and how that works. All right, our next myth or fact is that you don't need industry experience. That's a fact. Franchisors are not looking for industry experience. They're looking for people. I would say the number one thing a franchisor is looking for is someone that sees the benefit in and wants to follow their proven system. Franchisors are looking for folks that want to follow their system. Above and beyond that, they're looking for specific skill sets. You are going to be running a business. You're going to be the CEO of your business. So they want somebody with management skills, with good leadership and communication skills. So whatever they do, whatever their franchise is, they can teach it to you. That's the easy part. They cannot instill those skills in you. They need you to come to the table with those skills already. So I even will take that a step further and say that a lot of franchisors, or most franchisors, look at industry experience as more of a negative than a positive. And the reason for that is when you've done something for a long time and you have a lot of experience, you tend to have a mindset of, well, that's not how I've done it for the last 20 years. This is how I've done it. The truth of the matter is the franchisor doesn't care how you've done it for the last 10 or 15 years. They want you to do it their way. So they'd rather you come in as a blank slate and train you on their processes and systems versus having to train your old bad habits out of you maybe, and then teach you their new process. So I would say 99.9999% of my clients do not choose something that in any way, shape, or form correlates to what they did in the past. And why would you want to own a franchise? Well, it could be a great fit for you if it's going to give you the lifestyle and the income that you're looking for, right? Everybody's doing this for a reason. And 2 of those biggest reasons are lifestyle and income. And it's also a way to reduce risk. You're able to do so much third-party research and talk to other franchisees. It's a way to mitigate risk. And it's a way to also give you income security versus job security, which we're finding out is not that secure. So it's a way for you to take control of your income and not have to rely on someone else for that income. All right, let's talk about royalties. Excuse me. Royalties are a trade-off. You come in, most businesses will fail in the first 2 years, independent businesses. So what you're doing when you join a franchise is you're paying an initial franchise fee. That initial franchise fee really doesn't cover much. It covers some of your training, but it doesn't really cover all of the ongoing support that you're going to get. My analogy is that when you're a baby in the franchise, they're wrapping you in bubble wrap and they're slapping training wheels on you. They're doing everything they can to get you up and running. They have a whole team of people at the corporate office that are there to support you in this whole bubble wrap and training wheel phase that you're in. So at the end of the first 6 months or year, they are probably in the negative. With what your franchise fee was, that doesn't cover a whole lot. So the franchisor makes money in the long term on ongoing royalties. Royalties are usually a percentage of gross revenue. Your sales are low in the beginning, so your royalties that you're paying are very low, and a lot of times you may not even pay royalties in the first few months. So where the franchisor makes money is they make money on you in the long term once you're up and running and you're successful. And now you're less needy because they don't need to focus so much on training you. So they can take those assets and put them somewhere else. And really, the franchisor wants you to be wildly successful because the more money you make, the more money they make. They're sharing in your profit. So they're very, very encouraged and incentivized to help you be as successful as you want to be. So it's a short-term exchange for the long-term profit. And really, franchising works because of the experience of that franchisor. It's simple, it's duplicatable. The training and support that's available to you, that you've got operations manuals, you've got training manuals, you've got a way to market. They figured out the marketing, and it's that culture of teamwork. It's you're part of a family, and together you guys are growing this brand. And franchises are all over the place as far as the types that are available. You've got franchises that have been in business for 40 years or more. They've got thousands of locations globally. And then you've got emerging franchises that might just have a few locations, but might give you a little bit more leeway and wiggle room if you tend to be a little bit more entrepreneurial and want to impact a system or, suggest some changes. So some are very structured, some are more flexible, some are, wildly expensive, and, service-based businesses can be very, very modest. So really understanding that your personality, where you're going to be the best fit and what the best opportunity is for you, and remembering that there's no automatic correlation to what you invest and what you make. All right, so I don't know if you've ever, looked at those magazines like the Fast 500 or the Fast 50 or the Franchise Top 500. Some of these very, very big brands sometimes can skew the percentages because let's say there's failures, they can absorb those units and continue reporting the earnings of those units. They can turn them around, but now they're corporately owned. So things they're not always as they seem or they appear. So really it's important to really understand how you're going to perform in a franchise based on the research that you're doing. And the beautiful thing about a franchise, and the thing that I love about a franchise, is that you're in business for yourself, but not by yourself. When I was an independent franchise consultant for the first 6 years, it was very lonely. It's hard going from a corporate environment where you've got a team of people around you and you're always having human contact to working all by yourself in an office. At least with a franchise, you've got all the other franchisees, you're building your own little team maybe. So it's really a cool way to go into business, but not do it all alone and by yourself and have to figure everything out alone. And how do you find the perfect fit? What we talk about, finding the right fit. How's that done? Well, it's about doing proper research, figuring out if you're comfortable with that franchisor system and if you're willing to follow it, and establishing a budget for yourself and staying within that budget. It should be affordable. You shouldn't be overly strapped financially, and making sure you do enough research to mediate risk. Is that risk level satisfactory to you? Have you done enough research to think, yes, I really believe that I can do this? And will you enjoy doing it? The last thing you want to do with a franchise is buy yourself another job. That is not the goal here. The goal is to help you find something that you're going to be excited about and that you're going to enjoy doing for the next 5, 10, 15 years. And part of figuring out that ideal fit is knowing what's important to you. I talked about your why right in the beginning of this. Understanding what's important to you in business. You know, are you looking for control? Are you looking for flexibility? Or are you looking to maybe be more involved in your community? Do you want to be challenged? Do you want recognition? Do you just want a safe retirement? So really figuring out what's important to you, and is that franchise going to provide that in the long run? And the very, very, very big portion of figuring out what a good fit is for you is by accessing our entrepreneur profile. This is really the first step in our process after coming to a workshop like this. This is very similar to a personality profile, but it's been massaged for business ownership, and it gives us your entrepreneurial DNA, so to speak. So how do we get to know you? This is the first step. It's free to take this assessment. The only investment is about 20 to 30 minutes of your time. This is a form that will time out. So it's best to do this when you can sit down 20 to 30 minutes undisturbed and complete this and hit the submit button. Once we get your assessment, we will sit down with you. This is quite a long meeting. It's about an hour and a half to 2 hours, but we're going to help you build a business model. And we're going to ask you a lot of questions about what you like and what you don't like and what you want from your business. You know, do you want employees? And if you do, what kind of employees? You know, I can't tell you how many times somebody has said something to me about something about their business, and they say, wow, I wish I would have spoken to you before I bought my business. You know, buying a Subway because they're a big name, and it looks like they have a good crowd at lunch, and then waking up one day and realizing you hate managing high school students, that's a really bad time to figure that out. That's something you want to get down on paper and understand first. And that's part of how we know what we should present to you, is by understanding your answers to all of these questions and really understanding what your transferable skills are. What are you really, really good at? And then what are you not so good at? Because what you should focus on in your business is what you're really good at. You should hire for the things that you're not great at. You know, if you're not great at it, it's going to take you a lot longer to do it than it should. You're not going to enjoy it, and it's going to slow down your growth. So a lot of times when someone's new in business, they tend to really hold themselves back by trying to save money and not hire to fill in those gaps. And getting something down on paper, your business model, your goals. What do you want to, where do you want to see yourself in the next 1 year, 5 years, 10 years? This can be a moving target, but at least get something down on paper so you understand where you're going. Some additional resources that we recommend and help you, will provide for you, especially on the professional realm, is a franchise attorney, specifically a franchise attorney that understands franchise law. You don't want somebody looking at your franchise agreement that does not understand franchise law. Franchise law is very, very specific and should only be looked at by a franchise attorney that understands it. And then having an accountant look at your numbers. You're going to put a pro forma together. Does that look good? Have them look at the franchise disclosure document, review those financials of that franchisor. How does that accountant feel about that? Have them give you some advice and some feedback. And then there's some great books you can read. One of my favorites is Street Smart Franchising. It's not in print anymore, but you can find it used online. The E-Myth Revisited is a great book about why small businesses fail and how to prevent that from happening. And then More Than Just French Fries is a group of folks from FranNet, my organization, that got together and contributed to the writing of that book. The next step is to take your entrepreneur profile that I spoke about 3 slides ago. You can go to frannet.com, or the best way to do it, if you're not already in my database, is you can scan my QR code, and that'll give you immediate access to that entrepreneurial profile. You can also request the slides in that, or a copy of this recording. I don't know if you're in my database or Sarah's database, or if you're not in either one of our databases, but based at where you're at in the Metroplex, if you're on the Dallas side, you and I will work together. If you're on the Fort Worth side, you'll work with Sarah. So one of us will be more than happy to answer any questions you have and to help you through this process if you want to learn more. And we're done. I'm gonna thank you for your time and open this up to questions. I don't see any questions in the chat box, so feel free to type one in there. All right, I do see one question here. How do we know what franchises are available in the Dallas-Fort Worth market? That's a great question. That's part of what we help you with. It's hard to know that. I will say that a lot of things sell out very, very quickly in the Dallas-Fort Worth market. So it's always a moving target. And part of our process when we're preparing for a meeting with you is that we will do territory checks so that we're only presenting things that we know are available in your specific area or close to it. So that's part of the research that we do, and that falls on us. But it's hard to know just by looking online what's available and what's not. I will say that a lot of the established brands are not available. So that was a great question. I don't see any other questions in here, so I'm going to thank you for your time, and I'm going to end the meeting, and we will be following up with you. So thanks again for joining us today, and have an amazing rest of your day.